drunk heckler challenged Jimmy Page on stage. What Jimmy did stunned 15,000 people. He was screaming that Jimmy couldn't play guitar, that Led Zeppelin was overrated noise, that he wanted his money back, said Michael Thompson, who was sitting 3 rows from the heckler. The whole arena went silent. Jimmy stopped playing mid-solo. And then Jimmy did something I've never seen any performer do. He set down his guitar, walked to the edge of the stage, and said 5 words that changed everything. "Come up here and show me." What happened in the next 10 minutes left 15,000 people at Madison Square Garden absolutely stunned. Before we begin, if you love untold Jimmy Page stories, please subscribe and hit that bell. It really helps us bring you these incredible legends. It was October 15th, 1975, at Madison Square Garden. Led Zeppelin was performing their physical graffiti tour to a packed arena of 15,000 fans. But in section 112 sat a man who was clearly not there to celebrate. His name was Gary Morrison. He was 28 years old and very drunk. Gary had come with his girlfriend Lisa, a massive Led Zeppelin fan. Gary hated hard rock, thought it was loud noise, and couldn't understand Lisa's obsession. He'd started drinking before entering the arena, and by showtime had consumed 8 beers. The alcohol had transformed his indifference into active hostility. Then Jimmy began the opening notes of Stairway to Heaven, one of his most beloved and intricate compositions. The crowd fell into a reverent silence, thousands of people swaying together, completely absorbed in the music. It was one of those magical concert moments where everyone present felt connected to something larger than themselves. That's when Gary decided to make himself heard. "This is garbage," Gary shouted, his voice cutting through the music and the silence. Absolute garbage. A few people around him turned, annoyed. Lisa grabbed his arm, her face red with embarrassment. "Gary, please stop." "Why should I stop?" Gary slurred, shaking her off. "I paid good money for this. I can say what I want." Jimmy continued playing, either not hearing the disruption or choosing to ignore it. But Gary wasn't done. "You call this guitar playing?" Gary yelled louder, standing up now. "My nephew plays better than this overrated hack." More people turned. The disruption was spreading through the section. Some people were telling Gary to shut up. Others were calling for security. Lisa was trying to pull Gary back down to his seat, tears forming in her eyes. On stage, Jimmy's fingers hesitated on the guitar strings for just a moment. He'd heard something, but he kept playing, kept building toward the song's crescendo, refusing to let one heckler derail the experience for 14,999 other people. But Gary, emboldened by the attention and the alcohol, decided to escalate. "You're terrible," Gary screamed at the top of his lungs. "Get off the stage. You can't even play guitar. Led Zeppelin is overrated noise." The entire arena heard it this time. The moment hung in the air like a held breath. 15,000 people went absolutely silent. Even the band seemed to falter, unsure how to respond to this unprecedented disruption. Jimmy Page stopped playing. He let his guitar hang from its strap and stood there for a moment, looking out into the crowd. His expression was unreadable. Not angry, not upset, just thoughtful. Michael Thompson, who had been sitting 3 rows from Gary, watched it all unfold. "I thought security was going to jump on this guy immediately," Thompson would later say. "And they were moving toward him. But then Jimmy did something that stopped everyone in their tracks. Jimmy walked to the front of the stage, shielding his eyes from the stage lights, trying to locate the source of the shouting. "Who said that?" Jimmy asked, his voice carrying through the sound system. "Who said I can't play guitar?" Gary, with the false courage of the very drunk, waved his arms. "I did, right here, and I stand by it. You're overrated." The crowd around Gary was mortified. Lisa had her face in her hands, wishing she could disappear. People were shouting at Gary to sit down, to shut up, to leave. But Jimmy held up his hand, silencing the crowd. "What's your name, friend?" Jimmy asked. "Gary Morrison, and I want my money back." "This is the most overrated performance I've ever seen." There was a collective gasp from the crowd. The disrespect was stunning. This was Jimmy Page, a legend, an icon, a man whose guitar playing had influenced an entire generation. And this drunk man was publicly insulting him in front of 15,000 people. Jimmy nodded slowly, seeming to process this. Then he did something that shocked everyone in that arena. He smiled. "Gary Morrison," Jimmy said, his voice calm despite the circumstances. "Come up here. Come up on this stage." The crowd erupted, some in confusion, some in laughter, some in disbelief. Lisa grabbed Gary's arm. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "Don't you embarrass me any more than you already have." But Gary, in his drunken state, took the invitation as a challenge. "Damn right, I'll come up there. Someone needs to show you how real guitar playing is done." Security parted to let Gary through. They'd received a signal from Jimmy's road manager that this was intentional, that Jimmy wanted this to happen. Gary stumbled down the stairs, pushed past people, and made his way to the stage. The walk seemed to take forever. Roberts, with thousands of eyes watching this drunk, belligerent man, approached the stage where Jimmy Page stood waiting. Jimmy extended his hand to help Gary up on the stage. Gary ignored it, pulling himself up awkwardly, nearly falling in the process. When he finally stood upright, facing Jimmy Page with 15,000 people watching, something shifted in Gary's demeanor. The reality of where he was and what he'd done was starting to penetrate the alcohol fog. But Jimmy didn't give him time to back down. He took his Gibson Les Paul off and held it out to Gary. "You said I can't play guitar," Jimmy said calmly. "You said Led Zeppelin is overrated noise. You said you could do better. So here's your chance. Show me how it's done." Gary stood there swaying slightly, looking at the guitar. The crowd was dead silent. 15,000 people watching one drunk man face the consequences of his arrogance. I don't," Gary stammered. "You don't play guitar?" Jimmy asked, his tone still gentle. "But you're an expert on guitar playing." "Well, yes. I know what good guitar sounds like. I know that you're overrated. So show me," Jimmy said patiently. "Teach me. I'm here to learn, friend." Gary's face was turning red. The crowd was starting to murmur. Some people were laughing, others were booing Gary. But Jimmy held up his hand again, asking for silence. "It's okay," Jimmy said to Gary. "You don't have to play. But can I ask you something, Gary? What is it about my guitar playing that you don't like? I genuinely want to know." Gary's bravado was crumbling. Standing on stage face to face with Jimmy Page, being treated with kindness despite his cruel words. It was breaking through his drunken hostility. It's just, I don't know. I don't really listen to rock music, I don't understand it." "You don't understand it," Jimmy repeated, nodding. "That's honest. Thank you for that. So you came to a Led Zeppelin concert to see Led Zeppelin, to hear music you don't understand. And you decided that because you don't understand it, it must be bad." The simple logic of Jimmy's words hung in the air. Gary looked down at his feet, unable to meet Jimmy's eyes. "Can I tell you something, Gary?" Jimmy continued, his voice carrying through the arena. "All these people here," Jimmy gestured to the crowd, "they came here because this music speaks to something in them. It helps them feel connected. It gives them energy, emotion, a sense of belonging. Jimmy put his hand on Gary's shoulder, a gesture of genuine kindness. I don't need you to like my music, friend. But I need you to understand something. When you call it garbage just because it's not for you, you're not critiquing the music. You're dismissing what these people feel in their hearts. Tears started running down Gary's face. The weight of what he had done was crushing him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I was drunk and stupid and cruel. I'm sorry. The crowd was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another person, then a whole section. Within seconds, 15,000 people were applauding. Not mocking Gary, but acknowledging his apology, recognizing his humanity, forgiving him the way Jimmy had. Gary collapsed, sobbing. Jimmy caught him, held him up, and then did something even more remarkable. He began playing softly on his acoustic guitar, which had been brought out during the commotion. Just gentle, soothing notes that seemed to wrap around Gary's tears and the audience's collective emotion. The band, taking their cue from Jimmy, began playing softly behind him. And then the crowd, all 15,000 people, began humming along. They were singing to Gary, for Gary, surrounding him with the very music he'd called garbage, showing him through their voices what it meant to be part of something larger than yourself. Michael Thompson, watching from his seat, found himself crying. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, he would later say. This drunk man who'd been so hateful being held by Jimmy Page, being embraced by 15,000 people. It was grace made visible. After the song ended, Jimmy handed Gary a bottle of water. Drink this, Jimmy said. Sober up a bit. And when you leave here tonight, I want you to remember something. Every person you meet, every experience you have is an opportunity to learn or an opportunity to judge. One makes you bigger, one makes you smaller. Choose wisely, friend. Jimmy then signaled to security. Please take Gary back to his seat and make sure he and his girlfriend get home safely. He turned to Gary one more time. Thank you for teaching everyone here a lesson tonight. Sometimes we learn the most from our mistakes. Gary was escorted off stage, still crying, still apologizing. Lisa, who had watched the whole thing in shock, hugged him when he returned to his seat. The people around them, who had been so angry minutes before, patted his back, offered him tissues, showed him the same grace Jimmy had demonstrated. Jimmy turned back to his band and the crowd. Now, he said with a smile, where were we? Let's get back to this overrated noise. The crowd erupted in cheers and laughter. Jimmy started playing again, and the concert continued. But something had shifted. Everyone in that arena had witnessed something profound. A masterclass in how to respond to hatred with understanding, to cruelty with kindness, to judgment with grace. Gary Morrison sobered up during the rest of the concert. And he listened, really listened to Jimmy's music for the first time. He still didn't understand all of it, still didn't connect with every song, but he heard it differently now. He heard the heart in it, the skill, the attempt to reach out and touch souls. After that night, Gary became one of Led Zeppelin's biggest fans. Not because the music suddenly clicked for him, but because Jimmy Page had shown him what it meant to be truly human, to respond to hatred with love, to meet cruelty with compassion, to see the person behind the behavior. Years later, in 1995, Gary traveled to London specifically to visit the Hard Rock Cafe, where some of Jimmy's guitars were displayed. He brought with him the ticket stub from that Madison Square Garden concert, now laminated and precious. He told the manager his story, breaking down in tears as he described Jimmy's kindness. The manager smiled and said, "You're not the first person to tell me a story like that. Jimmy does things like that. He really believes that music should bring people together, not divide them." Michael Thompson, the man who witnessed it all from 3 rows away, has told the story hundreds of times. People always ask me what my favorite Led Zeppelin moment was, Thompson says. Was it hearing Stairway to Heaven live? Was it Jimmy's guitar solos? And I always tell them the same thing. My favorite Led Zeppelin moment was watching Jimmy Page turn a drunk heckler into a crying, grateful, transformed human being. That was Jimmy at his best, not performing, not showing off his skills, just being love in action. Lisa, Gary's girlfriend, who became his wife 2 years after that concert, still teases Gary about that night. But she also says it was the moment she knew she'd marry him. Not because of what he did, but because of how he received Jimmy's grace and let it change him. The story of the drunk heckler at Madison Square Garden has been told and retold over the years, each telling adding to the legend of Jimmy Page. But the core truth remains the same. On October 15, 1975, Jimmy Page had the opportunity to humiliate someone who had tried to humiliate him. Instead, he chose compassion. He chose teaching over punishment. He chose to see the human being beneath the horrible behavior. And in doing so, he didn't just change Gary Morrison, he changed everyone in that arena who witnessed it. Because they learned that night that true strength isn't about dominating your enemies. It's about refusing to see anyone as an enemy at all. Jimmy Page stopped a concert for a drunk heckler. But really, he stopped a heart from hardening, stopped judgment from winning, stopped hatred from spreading. He showed 15,000 people what grace looks like when it's tested, when it's challenged, when it would be so easy to respond with anger. And that's why the story of Gary Morrison isn't just about a drunk man at a concert. It's about what we all have the potential to be when we choose understanding over judgment, compassion over cruelty, and love over literally everything else. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more untold rock legends. What would you have done in Jimmy's place? Let us know in the comments.